Hey everyone, it's Foxx from modelmakingguru.com here, and welcome back to part 5 of our build of the HGUC Geara Zulu guards type. Now, this, as I said in the last episode, is an extra bonus episode. This isn't within the remit of the absolute beginner build. This is just me doing some stuff I want to do to this kit now I've finished that absolute beginner build. Going to use some products that are a bit more advanced. There's nothing stopping using these at all if you get these products. Just requires things like an airbrush, some pigments, some streaking grimes, things like that, and pastels. So it's more advanced than absolute beginner, but there's no reason at all, and I'm using that phrase absolute beginner again, but I shouldn't be. There's no other way for me to put it. There's no reason at all that you can't do what I'm about to do. If the kit you've just built, following my last 4 episodes, was your first one. Just takes a bit more specialised equipment, a bit more investment in products and equipment. So for, you know, somebody building with the parents, if you're a young guy and you're building with your mum or your dad or both, yeah, you're going to have to get them to buy you some stuff. So this is why I've not included it in the absolute beginner build, because those were simple techniques that anyone could do, just using a few basic products, some brushes effectively. This is a bit more specialised, airbrush and other things. So what we're going to do, going to be some challenges in this, because of course I've matte varnished it already, and I've put the dry brush of steel, and I've done the graphite. If this was a proper full build, I wouldn't have done the graphite and the dry brush of steel just yet. I would have done them after what I'm going to do. So yeah, I'm kind of breaking the rules a little bit, but it's just for fun. It's just for me, because it's stuff I want to do. So where are we up to? So you remember we finished the build. Here we go. All not painted at all, just weathered, tarted up a bit of dry brushing on the inner frame to make it look nice and metallic. Dry brush of that steel colour, and some graphite on the edges just to bling up. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to use some streaking grime and chipping fluids, just to add some dirt and dust. I'm probably going to use some pigments, some MIG pigments. I might do maybe some of their oils. I mean, they're not oil paints, they're just things to suggest things like oil. I've got to be really careful though, because obviously a lot of these are enamel based. This is bare plastic. It's been matte coated, but there's probably still bits of bare plastic, and enamel paints will eat away at this plastic, so I've got to be super careful when I'm doing this. So there's only so much I can do. So I will go and take this into its constituent parts, and then we'll crack on with some streaking grime with chipping fluid. So let me go and get set up, and when we come back we'll start that. We're going to use the streaking grime. So the first thing we're going to use is a MIG 2011 heavy chipping effects. This is basically a water-based solution, equivalent of hairspray. We're going to spray this on the surface, give it a couple of 3 coats, each coat to dry. Then once it's dry, we'll apply the streaking grime, which I'll show you, and then we'll use water to get some nice streaky effects. So let's get the compressor on, get it all noisy. Now the trick with this is to just get it on there, basically, not too heavy. The more you put on, the bigger chips you get if you're doing paint chipping, but the streaking grime is going to be enamel, so that's going to be a different kettle of fish altogether. So let's give this a go. I'm going to merely focus on the bottom half of the shield actually. Now it is kind of hard to see what you're doing, because the chipping effect is transparent, it's clear. So we're just going to go for a nice even coat. So you can see there it's a little bit lumpy. Now when it goes on it'll be all lumpy and bumpy, but that's fine. I'm just going to give it some air now and get it drying. Don't worry if it looks lumpy, that's not a problem, that's what it's supposed to do. This is effectively the barrier between the paint and the enamel paint we're going to put on there. And when you add the water later on, it will break this up, pull it away, and it will take the enamel paint with it, and that's how you get chipping effects. I don't know why I don't just hold it with this bit, as I'm not actually spraying this bit. That will be easier. We want this first coat to be dry. Now you use the chipping fluid neat, you don't water it down. Give it another coat. Now this stuff does dry clear, so it doesn't matter if it goes in other parts of the model really. You see, I'm not being too careful. Clunk, there goes the camera. Now if you were using, as I say, acrylic paints on top, then this would be how you would do paint chipping. You've seen me do it on my perfect grade Zaku build. And like I said, the more of this you put on, I can never remember if you get bigger chips or smaller chips. I can never actually remember. But this is basically the hairspray method, but using chipping fluid instead of hairspray. More reliable than hairspray because you're doing it for an airbrush, and chemically it's less random. There's a blob of chipping fluid again. Okay, give it one more coat. And you can go fairly heavy if you want, it just alters the effect that you get at the end. But we're not going to be looking for actual chipping on this. You'll see the effect hopefully if it works. I can't guarantee it will, it may go horribly wrong, but we'll find out. Now I'm just doing air again, just to try and flash it off. So while that's drying, I'll clean the airbrush. Now first thing you want to do is pour any excess chipping fluid back in your pot, because you don't want to waste it. You'll also need a lot of tissue for this. Here's how I do it. Get the tissue in, scrub it around. Ordinary water, tap water is fine. Remember, this stuff is water soluble. Bit of tissue. I can't really show it on camera because the camera's in the wrong place. Bit of a back blow. Then I'll just get the tissue into the cup. Squeeze it round. Bit more water. Blow it again. Apologies, I know it's not in focus. And what I'll do now is just pour that away. And then this bit I'm off camera, I'm just blowing it into my airbrush cleaner just to blow it through. And there's a reason I'm showing you this, is that it's about this long it takes before you can then go in with the enamel, with the streaking grime. It's about this long. So, my airbrush rinsed out. Just give it a last go with the tissue, just to dry it out. Noisy that, innit? Right, streaking grime. AMIG 1203, I think it's rubbed off. It's just called streaking grime. There's different grimes, but this is one I particularly like. Very messy, as you can see, so be careful with it. Give it a good shake. I've got the camera in just the wrong place here, haven't I? Get a little bit in the cup, which you can't see. I apologise, I'm doing this off camera, but I've got to have the camera close enough so you can see what's going on, but then that means I can't do anything close up. Okay, so we've got the streaking grime in the cup. Don't know what I'm doing. Right, so compressor on here. Coming through. I'm just going to give it a quick blast of air just to make sure there's nothing wet. If you look in the light, you can see if it's shiny anywhere it's wet. No, it should be alright actually. So here's how you do it. Get your streaking grime, just put it on. Not a massively thick layer. I'm going to go for more at the bottom. You see it's this kind of gorgeous dirt and engine oil brown colour. Just fading it up from the bottom. Don't worry if you think you've put too much on. What I may do is do a little bit in the top in a minute. when I've done, just to give it some effect. Go on the top a little bit. Right, that's going to do for that. So let me turn the compressor off. Airbrush on the stand. All you need now is a brush and some water. And all you're going to do is quite literally this. Take your brush, get it in the water, get a little bit off, and very gently drag it. A bit less water. I'm hardly putting any pressure on. Almost no pressure at all. It's actually really hard for me to see as well. A bit more water to go on the sides. I don't know if this will come out on camera. A bit down there, just to break it up. And then on the back we'll do the same. But a little less maybe on the back. Now it's time critical. You see I've dived straight in while the paint is still wet. If you leave this for a few minutes, you're going to have a real hard time getting the effect I want, and it's just going to look like dirt. So let's just get some scrapes. Now just get a piece of tissue, just gently pat it dry. I'm not dragging it, I'm just patting it dry. See there now we have a kind of streaky effect. So what I might do, while it's still setting, take a bit more off the top. You can go whichever direction you want really. Just remember you're removing the chipping fluid and that's taking the enamel paint with it. That's how this works. I quite like this little bit here, but I might fade this, and I'm almost putting no pressure on. The brush is almost not touching the surface. Edge, that might show the edge up a bit. And if I'd gone a bit lighter with the streaking fluid, it wouldn't have been quite as dark brown. Let's just pat it dry again. Apologies if this is all out of focus. I'm having to work at a very strange angle. Now try and keep your fingers off what you've just done, because obviously you'll smear the paint. That, my friends, is one way of using chipping fluid and streaking grime. Okay, on to the next stage. Right, so all that chipping is dried now. I had 24 hours to dry. You can see there it's quite nicely given that slightly mottled rust effect. I was debating whether to paint on some rusty brown chips, and I might do yet, but they seem to be in scale. Bearing in mind this is a 1/44 scale, so I don't want to go too big because that would just look super unrealistic. You can see there. Quite nice. So what's next? Next we're going to do some dry brushing with oil paints, and we're going to use my favourite standby in the whole world, 502 Abteilung Starship Filth. And possibly a little bit of 502 Abteilung engine grease. So what do we do? Well, you've seen dry brushing before. Move these out of the way. Seen the dry brushings before. We're going to take a little blob of well, actually, you know, we might just go for Starship Filth. Let's have a yeah, we'll just go for Starship Filth. So take some of your Starship Filth. I had an idea for the engine grease, but I decided not to. It's an oil paint. Actually, I'm not going to use the card. I'm going to use it straight from the tube, or from the lid even, because we're not going to need much. So I'll do it from the tube. Take yourself a soft brush. Now I would normally use a brush like this for dry brushing, but I want to do some very fine work here. So we're going to use a smaller brush. Now what we're going to do is we're going to simulate smoke on things like thrusters. On these we can't really do, we can do a little bit of smoke, but it won't really be visible with the grey anyway, so we'll just concentrate on the inside of the thrusters. And we're also going to do some on the weapons. So what you do, take yourself some of the lovely Starship Filth, and you can see what kind of colour it is there. It looks kind of bluey, but you'll see what colour it is when it comes out. This is oil paint. The trick with oil paint, it takes days to dry. So we're going to, as always, on our overexposed white tissue, sorry about that, get most of the Starship Filth off on the brush, on the paper. Now it's a bit harder when you're using a flat brush. It's easier to get all the paint off the brush. When you're using a brush like this, it's a bit more difficult, just because of the type of brush it is. Okay, so we've got lots of the paint off there. Right, so now what we're going to do, it's quite simply, dry brush on where we think the thrusters would make dark sooty stains. So in this case, it's going to be down from here. So I'm going to go from inside the thruster, and I'm just going to brush it, well, take a bit more paint off first actually. Brush it down in a straight line. And try and keep the line as thin as possible. Try and keep it in shot. And I'm just going to suggest, if anything comes off from the brush, doing it in such a way you can see it, which would be handy. I'll get some in the thruster. I think I took too much paint off. Fail. Right, so get some more brush off on the paint off on the tissue. Now you want it to be a subtle effect, it's not going to be an obvious effect. But you just want to basically darken and colour that area where the thruster would make a blast mark. Now you can see the thruster points out that way, so it's not really going to do too much on the foot, but it will catch the bottom of that. How's that looking? A little bit, probably won't come out on camera. It might look a bit extreme on camera, it might just look like grey paint, but worry not, because then what you can do is take your bud of cotton buds and you can blend it, feather it, rub some of it away, especially around the edge of the thruster here. You can just go in and rub the edges off, a bit more inside. Then we'll just rub some off the edges. Get in there a little bit and just fade it. You're just blending it in basically. So ultimately, it will look more sort of obvious on camera, just because of the nature of the camera, but in real life, if you didn't know it was there, you wouldn't have any way to know it was there basically. You wouldn't have any way to know at all. Let's do this one. So same again, we'll go in to the thruster first, and then we'll just do a bit of draggy on this part. It's kind of a dark green colour to the kit anyway, so it's going to blend in a bit more. So I'll just take that there. Rub that off the thruster. It will be more obvious on a light colour. And that's what we're looking to do. So quite simple, not complicated at all. You just need to have the oil paint. Now, when I do the next bit, of course, oh, actually one other thing I'll do. Let's go into these thruster bells here. Now you can see inside, they're all just nice and shiny and metallic. Not for long. Let's get in there with the dry brush. If you can see it. And I'm just going to dirty it up. Now Starship Filth is this kind of nice, sort of warm, gunky colour. It leaves, on silvers and whites, it leaves an ever so slight oil stainy brown tint if you brush it on lightly. Okay, so then if I go around the edges, take it back off again, just so you've got the shiny edge. Make sure it's on there. So now what you probably can't see on camera very well is that it's got this kind of dark and dirty tint to it inside, suggesting, hey, it's a rocket motor. But on the outside, it's reasonably clean, with a little bit of staining. This is the paint I use for what's called gunk washing, which I cover in many of the videos, but not using this method. So, there you have it. Now, yes, Starship Filth. Question I often get asked is, where the hell do I get Starship Filth? Pretty much nowadays, you don't. It's made by MIG Productions. It's 502 Abteilung Starship Filth. I still haven't resolved yet if MIG Productions is part of AK Interactive or one of MIG Jimenez's many enterprises. But they've long withdrawn Starship Filth now. However, they have just released some new oil paints. And in those oil paints is one called... I forgot what it's called. I'll post it up here. Oh, Smoke it's called. It's called Smoke. And it's pretty much Starship Filth. And that's the new... They've just re-released all their range of oil paints. So yeah, it's called Smoke. So if you want to find something similar, either get yourself some MIG 502 Abteilung Smoke, or you can mix your own using normal artist oil paints. Payne's Grey is a nice blue-grey colour, and if you mix something like burnt sienna or burnt umber into it, it makes a nice similar colour, not exactly the same, but similar. So yeah, don't bother trying to find Starship Filth now. You may find it in one or two places online. Yeah, they're going to gouge you on price because it doesn't exist anymore. Not really. Now you can see I'm going around the exhaust end of the bazooka. I'm just fading it on the edge. Again, it's a very subtle effect that most people will never actually even notice. Helps if I do it in camera and in the bit where it's in focus as well. And we'll do a bit round here. Now I know this is the round that would come off the top of the bazooka, so we'll just do a bit round the bit that's left behind. There wouldn't be any on the actual round itself. So if I just do it that way, just catching the edge, same as any dry brushing, just catching the edge. When this bit flies off, you get a back blast of soot and smoke. So we'll do it around here. I won't go on that pink bit because that's supposed to be the sight. And there you are. Dead subtle, dead simple. And on the rifle, what am I going to do on the rifle? Really, really simple. The rifle is just going to be a little tiny touch of sootiness on the end of the muzzle. I'll get it inside as well, just to darken that. That's going to be a little bit of sootiness just on the end of the muzzle. There you go. And I'll do one. This thing keeps falling. I'm going to have to glue this on. I'll do the same on the grenade launcher as well. Get it in there. And just get it around the edge. Now this stuff will dry reasonably matte, so don't worry if it looks a bit shiny while it's drying. Now with oil paints, if you know me, the golden rule when you're doing painting with oil paints is, especially with the gunk wash, as I say, which I've covered in other videos, allow 5 days for it to fully dry. With dry brushing like this, you can actually get away with about 24 hours. And I have found, although you should never ever dry oil paints with a hairdryer, when you've done a gunk wash or anything like that, when you've dry brushed it on, you kind of can. It's only such a light layer of paint that it's not the end of the world. If you dry oil paints with a hairdryer, not that you should ever really use a hairdryer, ideally, it can crack and look like a dried out riverbed. When you're doing a dry brush, it's such a thin layer, you can kind of get away with it. But if you're going to do anything on top of these dry brushed oil paints that isn't oil paint, or if you're going to use any thinned oil paints, strongly recommend on a normal model you would apply a gloss varnish or matte varnish or whatever you need. And that is that. So I'll go off and do the rest of the thrusters. I'm not going to do the ones on the backpack. You have to think logically about this. I'm not going to do the ones on the backpack here because they point up away from the surface. So imagine the fan of stuff coming out. It's not going to touch. It's not going to be in contact with any part of the backpack anywhere. So what I will do is go inside the thruster bells like I did on the legs, but there's nowhere else it's going to touch, so I'm not going to do that. You can use it for shading as well. You can dry brush Starship Filth as a shade colour, but I'm not going to. And you can also do a gunk wash, like I say, which I've covered in other videos, so just look up gunk. I won't go into it here, but look up gunk wash. So I'll go off and finish those other little thruster bells, let that dry, and then we'll move on to possibly the last step, which I think will be some form of powders. So, back in a moment. Right, and so on to the next bit. I'm going to use some pigments. I'm going to be using the Ammo Dark Earth Modelling Pigment, AMIG 3007. What is a pigment? It's basically paint without all the liquid. It's just powder. Now these pigments are perfect for dusty, dry effects. You can mix them with all kinds of things. You can mix them with white spirit, you can mix it with plaster. If you want really heavy effects, you can mix it with all different things. You can mix it with some of the sort of dirt and dust liquid products like the dry earth splashes and things like that to get a more sort of fluid mixture. We're just going to do it as neat pastel. Now if you're doing it like I'm going to do it now, you kind of need to make sure you never touch this model again or keep it to minimum, because we're gonna be using a pigment fixer, but because this is bare plastic, if we use a pigment fixer or any kind of spirits to seal the pigments in place, it may eat away at the plastic. So it's going to be minimal use of anything to fix the pigment in place. So it will come off with handling. So you just need to not handle it ever again. So I've got a piece of card down because this will get messy. I've got a brush that I don't mind sacrificing. This will kill your brush completely, so don't use the most expensive brush you've got. What do we do? Dead simple. Get some pigment on the brush. Just get the brush in the pigment. Now bearing in mind, you've got to keep a sense of scale. If this is a 1/35th tank, this would be brilliant. Because this is a 1/44 scale vehicle, you can't just slap it on and have it going halfway up the leg, because that's, you know, a person's this big. It's not going to work that way. So we're going to concentrate on the bottom of the foot, which you can't see unless I bend the leg. Concentrate on the bottom of the foot. Let me just put the focus. There we go. And you can see here I knocked the brush and all this pigment came off. So all we're going to do, take the pigment, put it on. And you can see why this is called Dark Earth, because it looks like Dark Earth. Now, notice I'm only going very lightly, and I'm going a little way up, but not too much. I wanted it to catch on this edge here and get into all the little grooves. Okay, now what we can do is we can knock the excess off. If this is a big armoured vehicle, you might want to leave big clumps of this powder lying around. Let's see if I can fake one. See, I had a big pile there. If you were to put some pigment fixer on that, it would kind of stay looking like a clod of earth, and that'd be great. On this, that's like the size of a person, so that's not going to work. We're looking for more of a shading effect. Now what I need to do, it's difficult now because I want to show off the thrusters, but of course these would get covered in dirt and dust and mud, but let's just sacrifice our artistic integrity for a moment. So that's there. So you can use a cotton bud just to take it back off again. You could, if you wanted to, moisten a cotton bud in water, like this, and rub it away. You can quite easily remove the pigments that way. So you've got your shiny. And what I might do is just put a hint of it, what little bit is left on the brush, not much. There's another reason you want to use a piece of card. What little bit I've got on here, I might maybe just dabble in here a little bit. Now you can go carelessly, you don't have to worry too much. Get into all the little grooves and crooks and nannies. Knock it off. Blow on it. And there, it just gives that slightly dirty look. Now there's very little pigment left on there, but it does just change the colour of it to a dirty look a little tiny bit. Now I'm never going to touch that bit again, so that's fine, I can leave that as it is. If I put white spirits or thinner on that joint, you can get, or pigment fixer, you can guarantee it will get into the joint, it would eat the plastic and your leg would fall off. So not ideal. But what I might do, go back in here again a little bit, because remember this is the foot, this is going to be walking across. In my imagination, I know in Gundam Unicorn these things are only ever in space, but let's just ignore that. I don't do canon accuracy, I do what is fun. So what I do is say this has been on Earth, or it's been in one of the sides, and it's walking around in fields and on grasslands and things and maybe mud. And therefore it's picked up some mud and that. So what we want to do now is we want to fix that in place. And this is where I could do it on the foot because there are no joints. We're going to use the Ammo Pigment Fixer AMIG 3000. It's basically, it's kind of just white spirit. But that's probably a special blend of white spirit. I know what Mig's like with his special blends of things. So all we're going to do with this is we're going to get ourselves a brush that I forgot to get. A brush. I'm going to just move that there. We're going to take some pigment fixer on the brush. Just dip it in, which you can't see because I'm not on camera. Now you don't want too much. And all I'm going to do is just touch it to where the pigments are. Just a little bit, not too much. Now if this was on a joint, you'd be putting the joint at risk. On Gunpla only, this refers to, but when I talk about, like, you know, the thin as eating plastics, that's only referring to Gunpla, Bandai Gunpla. And it's only really referring to if you've not painted your Gunpla. If you've painted it and primed it, then you're probably going to be fine. As long as you've fully primed and painted it, you should be no problems at all, because the primer and the paint will protect everything from things like thinners. So you can see here we're just touching it to the surface. Doesn't look like it's getting everywhere, but that's fine. And I'm just doing it in random places around these grooves and panels, just to help it bind. And that's all you need to do. I just need to leave it for a little while for that pigment fixer to gas off and dry off. And then we're good to go. So I'll go and do the rest. I'll just get my cotton bud. And one thing you can do, oh, that's got water on it, idiot. You can brush it back, just to remove some. Remember, it's not really stuck to the surface, so if you want to fade it and blend it, you can do. Ideally not when you've got pigment fixer on there. Or what you could do is, if you use, say, a wet brush, let me find another brush. Finding a brush for the things that I'm doing. There you go, brush, bit of water. Let's try experiment. You could do this, just for simple streaking effects. I don't know how this will come out, how well, but we'll find out in a moment when I let all this dry off. A bit more water. I could brush it away from the edge and have it accumulate around the bottom. It's a bit too unrandom and not stripy there, so let's just try and keep them straight, shall we? It might just make an interesting streaked pattern. As you can see there, you get some kind of stripy streakiness. Kind of interesting. You could build that up however you wanted from edges and things like that. So we'll leave that to dry for a while. I'll go off and do the other one. The reason you put this card down is A, because it gets everywhere, and B, I've got a piece of folded card. When you're finished, fold the card and tip it back into the pot full of pigment. There's no point wasting this stuff. It's not expensive, but there's no point wasting it. It will last you, a pot will last you a good long time. So don't throw it away. You can get other colours. You can get like light dirts, fresh muds, things like that. And you can also get, like I say, the liquid dirts and muds, like these. These can be mixed into the pigments to make thicker pigments. If you're doing like a big tank, obviously then you're in the realms of, you can make things like lumps of mud and things like that, which is brilliant. You can't do it on this because of the scale. You've got to keep in mind, always keep in the back of your mind, how big is a person's head. Use that as a basis to judge how far you want to go. If I was painting paint chips, I'd keep in mind how big is the head of a dude or dudette, because ultimately if you do a paint chip that's 5 times the size of a human head, it's going to look stupid. Or a big lump of earth that's the size of a boulder. You know, there wouldn't be a boulder stuck there. So keep in mind how big things are related to your model. Keep that sense of scale as best you can. And if this was, like I say 1/35 tank, this effect will be brilliant. I just make it muddy everywhere. But it's not. So there you go. And again, most of this will come off anyway, so that's fine. So I'll go and do the rest of these, get all this finished off. When we come back, we'll do the very last bit, I think. And then we're kind of done. I think, unless something else crosses my mind, I think we are kind of done then. So, back in a moment. And so, for the second time, we are done. I'm really pleased with how this has come out. I'm really chuffed with this. Given that we've used such simple techniques, and I'm not blowing my own trumpet here, do not get me wrong, I'm not saying, oh my god, I'm brilliant. I'm not. I am actually very surprised how this came out, given the simple techniques I used. I mean, I knew it would come out looking alright with simple techniques, but I didn't think it'd look this alright. So, wow. Let this be a lesson for you, even if you're just starting out. Your first few builds don't have to look like ass. They can look really, really good. Just with some simple basic techniques that you can learn at your own speed and then move on to more complex techniques. I'm really pleased with how this metal inner frame parts came out. They just look like metal, and I surprised myself. I didn't think they'd look like metal. I thought they looked like dry brush plastic, so yeah. Pigments came out really well. I'm liking how they collect in the knee, back of the knees here. I didn't show you that, me doing that bit on this leg. Came out nice and dusty around here. Of course, I can't really touch it much. Managed to find a master grade stand I can stick this on. I haven't got a real grade stand. But yeah, I'm really pleased with this. The graphite, reapply the graphite came out really well. And I'm liking the way the legs look nice and dusty and dirty. It doesn't look like painted on dry brush dirt. It's blending with that streaking grime just to give that overall discoloured, grubby, grimy mud walking around in fields for a long time kind of look. So yeah, I'm really chuffed. So that's going to do it for this episode. It was only really a few quick techniques. I was going to do a few more. I had a few more things planned, but with weathering, over time you will learn that it gets to a point where if you start thinking to yourself, do I need to add this extra bit? Stop. Because you can overdo weathering and it just looks like you've overdone the weathering. It can get too far and you do an extra bit and it just ruins what would have been a great looking model. So I even think I went a little bit too far on this, but there you go. That's just me being self-critical. But yeah, if ever you get doing a build and you think, I think it looks all right now, just take that as your cue to stop. You'll find your own limits. But while you're starting out, the moment you start thinking, do I need to do anything else? You probably don't. So yeah, I didn't do all the other techniques I was going to show. I was going to do some chipping and some other bits, and I thought, no, I'll just leave it there. So that's going to do it for this little extra episode. Couple of few extra techniques that aren't really that much more advanced, but I didn't really want to include them in the main build because you may not have all the stuff needed for it. So thank you again so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, adios amoebas.